Welcome, Dr. Cabral, to the Biohacker Babes. Thank you for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, we are going to do a very fun episode sharing some, I'll say, insider information onto Lauren and I. We recently did some lab work with you. But before we jump into that, I just want to hear from you. Why do you think so many, I'll say, quote unquote, healthy people, even biohackers, are still struggling with like chronic fatigue, digestive issues, brain fog, all these things? Like, what do you think is the missing piece for a lot of these healthy people?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I actually was doing a separate workshop on why healthy people can even get cancer. And it's like, well, how is this even possible? And so, what we want to look at are the three main buckets. So, basically, there's our genetics, and they matter, but truthfully, it doesn't really matter unless they're in the environment that allows for their negative expression. So, for example, I was healthy for 17 years. And then for 10 years of my life, from 17 to 27, I struggled with my health. Doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. I had autoimmune issues. I had Addison's disease. I had type 2 diabetes. I had a lot of immune issues and couldn't get better. And so my genetics were obviously playing out with rheumatoid arthritis and type 2 diabetes, all these things. And then at 27 or 26 and a half, I met my mentor, helped me get well within a 6-month period of time after struggling for 9.5 years. And then I was well at 27. And now I'm 47, turning 48, and I haven't had any issues for 20 years, meaning like normal health issues, of course, but like been very healthy. And all of those, no more Addison's disease, no more autoimmune, no more type 2 diabetes, nothing. Like literally great health, great energy, all those things. So it's like genetics matter, sure, it's what you're going to get, but it doesn't mean that you have to get it. But then how do we get sick? And so it's different for each individual. It could be heavy metals, it could be high levels of stress, it could be Lyme, it could be mold, it could be what I had, which was candida overgrowth and SIBO and H. pylori. So I had massive gut issues, food sensitivities that allows for this inflammation to basically permeate through the whole body. And I was never going to get better until I fixed that. But since I was sick in the mid 90s to late 90s, doctors didn't really, ever talk about leaky gut or anything like that. They would never even say the name. And so now, of course, it's very well documented. So that's the second part. And I would say that the third part is usually if you do get really sick, like an autoimmune issue, alopecia, etc., there's usually a triggering event, which is a life, a very stressful moment in life, a breakup, a death in the family, a job loss, something that really hits you hard where it overflows that rain barrel. That's what I've seen in my career. And the issue is that most people just don't know how to then rebalance the body because they're only running their blood work. Now, blood work is amazing. Don't get me wrong. I run my blood work 3 times a year, but it does not show you gut function and show you a lot of the other things that we're going to go over here today.
Great. Yeah, we love labs. It's always been so interesting to us to look under the hood because we all have blind spots, right? We all sort of
Yes.
normalize what we're feeling day to day, and then we don't really know where to go, and we haven't taken that bird's eye view. So I think labs are so interesting. And going even deeper, which we're going to look at today, is the hair tissue mineral analysis. But I love your approach because you really talk about fixing the system, not just fixing the problem. And in your case, you mentioned candida. We could probably get into more things that you struggled with, but can you explain how you would, from like a big perspective, not go after the candida, rather fix the terrain or fix the system that is supporting the body's ability to even be overtaken by something like that?
Yeah, without a doubt. And so, we have symptoms. So the symptoms that an individual might be suffering from, let's say they had candida overgrowth or SIBO. So they have bloating. They might have skin rashes, like I had skin rashes from it as well. They might start to get a dry scalp, might get even athlete's foot. And so, or brain fog. And what happens is then we start to try to do things for brain fog and for athlete's foot and for skin rashes, and we're using topicals, when all the while, what we need to do is, as you said before, not feed it, that's one, but then also use natural antifungals and a proper sequencing to remove things like the biofilm in the gut, which is starting to be more talked about, in order to eliminate it. And then once it's eliminated, we repopulate with the healthy. And hopefully, we've learned our lessons of now what to do. Now, we're never perfect, right? So like to this day, we're always learning, we're always trying to do our best, but none of us are perfect, and that's okay. I always say, like on a protocol, you just need to be 80 to 90% good. And if you're that good, it's going to work out, because it's also not meant to be done overnight. The protocols that we give clients are typically 12 to 16 weeks. And it's a gentler approach. It allows them not to have to be perfect. And they also know that at the end of 16 weeks, they are going to be better. They are going to be balanced. And so now there might be a phase 2. If you have candida overgrowth and SIBO or parasites, we fix those first. And then after that, we move on to mold. Because for mold, first we need to remediate wherever it's coming from. And then next, what we need to do is we already have to get rid of the deeper underlying issues to improve the overall immune system. And your immune system's never going to be strong enough to battle aflatoxins, aflatoxins and ochratoxin A, if the gut is still leaking. Right? Basically, increased intestinal permeability means every time you eat, you're essentially spilling proteins, amino acids into the bloodstream. And as we know, 80% or so of the immune system is in or around the gut, called the gut-associated lymphoid tissue. And that creates inflammation, right? When your immune system gets turned on to a higher degree, that creates inflammation. Not necessarily doing anything wrong. It's just if it sees things in your bloodstream, it's going to increase the inflammatory response, which then for most people eventually leads to autoimmune issues.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned the rain barrel effect, which hopefully our audience is familiar with that term by now, because we like to share that a lot, and that was your first book. So if anyone wants to look deeper at that, definitely check out your book. But I think the rain barrel effect is really interesting for the sake that you hear about these people, or you look at these people and you say, well, how did they have a root canal for their whole life? Or how did they smoke their whole life and never have health issues, right? And it's like maybe their rain barrel wasn't full because everything else was in line. So
that's right.
Definitely an interesting thing. So with lab testing, now you have like the big 5. Is HTMA really a good place where everyone should start?
It's the easiest, most accessible lab for anyone pretty much anywhere in the world, because the sample doesn't need to be frozen, nothing really needs to be done, hard to mess it up, and it can be done for ages 3 years old and up. So we have entire families completing it to look for heavy metals, to look at their electrolyte stress-based levels, which really is an inside look at your adrenal-based function and sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and then the rest of the minerals in your body. So it's an amazing test. It was the very first test I ran at 19 years old, that and something called the stress mood and metabolism test, which allowed my functional medicine doctor, naturopathic doctor, to then share with my general practitioner that I'm not producing any cortisol. And that's what the stress mood and metabolism test. And I basically we're going to get to it in a moment, but my electrolytes, not for the consumption of electrolytes, I was consuming plenty of salt, right? But they were just bottomed out low. And so we're going to go through how these different labs, who are not all the same company, share with you the same thing in a little bit of a different language. And that's why the Big 5 gives you a very broad look at your vitamins and minerals, your gut function, heavy metals, your omega-6 to omega-3 inflammatory levels, your food sensitivities, and your hormones. And it's impossible really to get that type of insight without running labs like these. And so the thing is, not everybody wants to run the Big 5, and that's okay. They might want to just dip their toe in the water and start with the minerals and metals test, and we think that's amazing. Yeah.
Can you explain just generally the big difference between serum blood work and then the hair tissue mineral analysis? Because people probably heard what you said, and it's like, we look at electrolytes in the blood. Why would we need to look at them in the hair? Can you explain?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the blood is a homeostatic fluid. That means that your calcium level, your potassium level, when you look in your blood, your sodium, your chloride, chloride could be a little off based on stomach acid. It's almost always going to be perfect. It is a huge problem if your electrolytes are off in your blood. That means it is not pulling into your bloodstream what it needs to survive. So when we look at that, we say, wow, like there's a parathyroid issue. There's a huge issue, like massive catabolism if your calcium levels are high. So your blood is always meant to be level. That's the thing. And so when you look at what's out of range on blood work, bottom 2.5%, top 2.5%. And that's not even from a healthy population. That's from a sick population. So although I always, I run blood work with my clients and absolutely recommend it, and of course run it myself and with my wife, right? And so that's important. With everything is different. So we kind of go through all of them. Blood, important to run to essentially diagnose disease. If something's gone really wrong, it's off in the blood. Okay. The next one we look at would be saliva. That shows what's able to be used, that's being used. That's why when we use saliva tubes for hormone, it shows us exactly what free testosterone is. Estrogen, progesterone, DHEA, sulfate. We look at cortisol throughout the day. Really hard to look at cortisol 4 times throughout the day on blood work. You'd have to get your blood drawn upon waking, because you need to know cortisol awakening response. Then you would get it run before lunch, before dinner, and then before bed. So nearly impossible to do that. The next one is blood spot. That's capillary blood. That's going to be very similar to blood work. So there's that one. And you can get like 80% of the different functions with the blood spot card, not 100, but we only run the ones that are clinically valid. And again, these have been around for 40 plus years, all CLIA certified labs. Here is, that one is a protein. So it's what's been excreted, what's been used. And for every half inch of hair, you're looking at about 30 days. So I'm pretty short here. So all I'd be looking at with a hair sample, a couple snips of hair, is the last 30 days. For the both of you, you have longer hair. You take just a couple snips from underneath where you never see it missing, and then not to right to your scalp, but close to it. And then what you look at is 1.5 inches. If you sent it 1.5 inches, and I'll ask you when we go through your labs, that shows 90 days, right? So a half an inch for essentially every 30 days. And the last one would be urine-based, and urine's going to show us what was used and what was excreted, so it's a waste product. I guess there's one more stool. If you wanted to run a stool test, that's going to show bacteria and parasites.
That's excellent, because I think people are always arguing the efficacy of one over another, but we have to look at why are we testing it? What story is it telling to really understand, is this right for one person over another? But just to come back, you said this is probably a great place to start for everyone because of the ease and the validity of the results.
Absolutely. This has been around for over 40 years now. They use this with FBI testing. They use it with NASA. They use this in clinical studies on PubMed with pregnant women looking at heavy metals such as mercury in fetal development. So yeah, these tests are very well validated. But again, remember, the old guard will always push back against anything new, even if it is 40 plus years old. So yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not here to convince anybody. I'm here to provide options. They work for myself, and we've run this now on over 300,000 clients worldwide over the last.
Wow.
We've done this for now 16 plus years. So yeah, it's been
That's incredible.
Got a data set.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
There's a massive data set. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Well, we'd love to dive into our labs. I don't know how you want to kick this off, but we're going to do some screen sharing. So if you are listening to this podcast, we really encourage you to head over to YouTube where you can see the visuals. Dr. Steven's going to screen share. And Dr. Steven, I'll let you pick out of a hat who you want to attack first and present. But just for context, you don't really know you don't know anything about our lifestyle, our habits, our nutrition. So you don't really know the story behind what results are being presented here. We both tested between, how long did you test? A month and a half ago to a month ago?
End of December I did mine.
Yeah, okay. So this would be end of 2025 for both of us.
And did you both do about 1.5 inches of hair?
I think I did an inch.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's about 60 days then for you, Lauren, and maybe 90 days for you, Renee. So then just keep in mind the timetable we're looking at would be October, November, December, and then for Lauren, November, December. So just, kind of like think about where you were at that time, and that's a nice way to look at it. But again, this is the same thing. When you run your blood on one specific day, it's really looking at the last 12 hours or so from when you've been fasted. So everything's a snapshot in time. This one is the only one that's showing a longer term view, although you can make the argument for things like hemoglobin A1C, that's a 90-day average of your blood sugar, right? So we're looking at averages right now. How this works is literally you send in the hair sample to the lab, they burn it, turn it to an ash, and then they look at the minerals and heavy metals inside of that. And hopefully the minerals are at a good, steady level space, which will on our graph show which is in the green, right? So that EcoLife essentially takes all of the data, it publishes it across a very easy to read, I think, chart, which if you are in the bottom where it's red, that means too low. If you're in the yellow, it means out of range, low, but you're not quite way low. If you're in the green, that means optimal, but everything works in ratio, so we'll talk about that. The orange above is essentially out of range high, and then the red is high at the very top. And again, that's kind of how I think all blood work should be. It's not how blood work is. You're either in range or out of range, right? For regular conventional, what we like to do is show that there are ranges of this. And so we're first looking at Lauren's lab, and how this starts off is we look at your calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. The first thing people always say is, but I take calcium and magnesium. Why are my levels low? So let's go through that. Your electrolyte levels show stress response in the body. When the body is very stressed, it pulls calcium into the bloodstream. Some of that will go back to the bones, back where it belongs in certain tissues, and some of it will be excreted. When the body is under high levels of stress, we will see elevated levels of calcium. And if the person's consuming enough magnesium, it will show higher levels of magnesium. And that is because magnesium helps to stop fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system. Why would sodium be high without necessarily taking a lot of sodium in through the diet? Sodium will be high because when the body's in fight or flight, it produces a hormone, not just cortisol, not just norepinephrine or adrenaline that we think about, but something called aldosterone. Aldosterone regulates the amount of sodium retention by the body. And so that will increase blood pressure for fight or flight, etc. So, and then the last part is potassium. So potassium levels are a direct response from the adrenals and with the adrenals as well as the kidneys in order to balance sodium. So everything is partners: calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium, and essentially on and on. So calcium and sodium are more sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and magnesium and potassium are more parasympathetic, relaxation. So when we look at Lauren's lab, and again, I don't know the both of you personally, and so I don't know that what I'm sharing is going to be dead on or not. What we do in consultations is we listen, we share your results, and one isn't more important than the other. So we listen to the human, right? Their story is very important, and then we show the results. And usually they're going to be pretty close coinciding. So here's what I see based on your lab. I see low levels, but low optimal of calcium. Magnesium's a little bit lower. So again, everything's a ratio. It's called a 6.67 to 1. Let's just call it a 7 to 1. If I were to multiply 7 times 4, which is your magnesium, I get 28. You're at 36. So you're just above that calcium right there. But they're both fairly low. However, we have sodium quite high. We want it up to a 36, no higher. You're a 53. So is that like super high? No. I mean, I've seen 300 before. So it's high though. And what that shows though is an elevated sympathetic nervous system response with a lower potassium and lower other electrolytes. Here's what it typically means. It usually means that this person is a go-getter, high performer, overachiever, probably produces a good amount of dopamine, but they've been doing that now for years, and so they're still in a good amount of stress-based response. The body's not worn out, but it no longer has the same reserves that it once did. So that's what I'm seeing on this. Again, it may fit you, it may not, but I'll let you respond.
Yes to all. High performer, overachiever. So when I took the test, it's interesting because I had done an HTMA 2 months prior, and my sodium and potassium were even more out of a balance in the previous test. So they actually came closer to the range. That previous test, I was in New York City performing in a Broadway show, up late, circadian disruption, a lot of EMF, like all the crap that's in New York City, right?
Mold.
And then, yeah, who knows?
It is the city that never sleeps. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then when I did this test, I was in Maryland, which is where we're from. I was staying at my parents' house, so a much more controlled environment, though I was still performing. So up late in probably a dark, moldy theater, all the Wi-Fi, all that stuff, but a little more regulated. So it's interesting for me to see the before and after, even though these are still out of balance, sodium, potassium mainly, they do seem to be coming closer together, though I don't know how much this could reflect like long-term adrenal story, because I have dealt with burnout, like very classically in my 20s.
That. But you're not too far off. You're really not. And for you to see that type of quick response in 2 months is rare. So that does mean that you probably have a strong constitution and that you'll bounce back fairly quickly, which is good. It took me, quite a bit, like quite a long time to rebalance my electrolyte levels, even when I overcame Addison's disease. And when I say electrolytes, it doesn't mean that you can consume electrolytes. What I mean by that is the checks and balances of what's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It means how the body's reacting and responding to stress. That's really all that means. And it just takes a while to essentially let your nervous system know that, like, you're safe, you're okay, everything's good here. And sometimes it means overcoming childhood trauma or obsessive compulsive disorder or perfectionism or any of those things. And that just takes time. So, like, again, we just have to be kind of gentle with ourselves and just say, all right, I see where I'm at. Here's how I can improve it. And so, for you, you're probably taking some magnesium. I don't know. A lot of people are. But we would certainly increase your magnesium a bit. Not too much, but we would definitely do it a bit. We use a product called full spectrum magnesium. You can use your favorite product, but anything with magnesium glycinate, lysine, malate. Those are all good forms, very great for absorption. Malate's nice for some energy, ATP. And we would probably just do one capsule, which is about 110, 120 milligrams at lunch, and then probably 2 at dinner would probably be the appropriate amount. But I always say start slower. Try 1 at dinner. How do you feel after 3 days, 5 days? Good. Okay. Let's add maybe 1 more at dinner. And then we might try the 1 more at lunch. If you feel any anxiety or stress at lunch or after lunch, then that will help, carry you through the afternoon.
Well, question for you. On this test, I had actually stopped taking as much magnesium. I was doing sort of a mineral test.
Yes.
Sorry, not an HTMA test, but I was testing new minerals that I was taking. So I pulled off of my traditional magnesium, but I've always taken quite high amounts of magnesium, like in the 600 to 700 milligram range. Before this test, was only taking maybe 200 to 300. Does that give you any more information or context?
Yes, it does. And so the amount that I just, again, suggested, not providing any medical advice to anybody out there, would be about 320 to 360 milligrams. Now, you will get it from diet and nutrition as well. So obviously, I'm expecting that this is just basically on top of a healthy diet, which I'm sure you're both eating. So because if you look at your number, it's good for me to know. I mean, this is why, again, we listen to our clients and our patients. You're not that far off from being at the proper ratio with calcium. And so what I would say is you just need a bit more than what I recommended. And so it's probably going to be closer to maybe 400 for you rather than 600. And you'll know, too, your blood pressure will start to go a little too low. You might feel a little lightheaded, a little too much brain fog or fatigue if you take your magnesium too high. You don't want to go too high with magnesium, but certainly it is bio-individual.
Yeah, great.
All right, so that's how we look at the stress part of it. Then we move on to your minerals. And essentially, we're looking at iron and copper and manganese and zinc, chromium, selenium, and phosphorus. So for iron, typically it's always low. And we want it low because this is not a blood work test, right? We're always very fair about what should be looked at where. So iron should always be looked at only on blood work, never anywhere else. However, we run it here because if it's high, we've found in so many people, we say, great, it's good that we found it, right? It could mean what's something called hemochromatosis. And so that means you have too much iron in your blood. And we see it all the time in men. We see it sometimes in postmenopausal women and not often in women during who have their cycle, but sometimes we do. And so it's important to look at that. Yours looks totally fine. It's just higher than we would typically see it, but it's nowhere near high. But next time you run your blood work, I would just make the recommendation, run your ferritin, your total iron binding capacity, and just a good iron panel, and you'll know for sure. Yep.
Great.
Copper is pretty great. Like it's right at the bottom. It's 1.6, but copper and zinc always go together. They're basically partners. And so what you want to look at is about a 12 to 1, 15 to 1 ratio of zinc to copper. And so it's a little on the lower side compared to zinc. So what would this mean? Well, sometimes people supplement with zinc and they don't supplement with copper. And so they're going to see naturally higher levels of zinc. That's not uncommon at all. I would also say that people who do not have optimal thyroid, and I don't know if you have any thyroid issues, but your selenium is low and your copper is just borderline, it could lead to some like functionally low thyroid, which typically means a TSH above a 2.0. And meaning like it's not above a 5 where there's hypothyroidism, but it might be functionally low or just not enough copper in your diet. That's all.
Yeah, I've always suspected low copper, and in blood work, copper and zinc have always been low, but in good relationship to each other.
Yes.
But I've always had very low ferritin with normal serum iron. And when I saw this, the low chromium selenium, I was like, oh, it's those minerals, maybe not the copper so much. I mean, I probably could support the copper a little bit, but knowing that I have low ferritin, does that elucidate anything else?
Well, we do look at transporters of iron, right? And so what I would say is if I had your blood work in front of me, I would say, okay, we have enough iron, we have enough total iron binding capacity, we're not able to store it as well. What might we need? Just a couple easy things that we could do is during a high iron meal, we're just going to include 500 milligrams to maybe 1,000 milligrams, which is a lot at one meal. Probably just 500 milligrams is good. And then another meal, we would do 500 milligrams of vitamin C. And that's just going to be an easy way to pull that vitamin C in as well. And then cofactors in terms of oxygenation of the red blood cells would be your B6, B9, B12. And then if you have your copper, zinc, and vitamin C, then that's all you need. Like that's going to work. There is one more that I wanted to chat with you about, and that is your phosphorus, which is, it's fine. It's just like on the lower end of fine. I don't want to nitpick. So I nitpick for my clients because I always like perfect. I like optimal. And what I would just say is this, is that maybe we get, we need to look at your vitamin D levels. And if they're not optimal, we need them between a 50 and a 70. And your calcium, magnesium are a little bit low. So I feel like between vitamin K2, vitamin D3, calcium, magnesium, we could pull that phosphorus up there a bit for your bones and then decrease overall stress with magnesium, a product called Adrenal Soothe that you would take 2 at dinner, and that is clinically proven to reduce cortisol by 33%. That has ashwagandha, and again, people can use whatever products they want, but 600 milligrams of ashwagandha, L-theanine at 100 milligrams to 200 milligrams, and phosphoserine will help relax those cortisol levels before bed. And that's a great thing because as humans, we're meant to be diurnal, right? So we've got daytime hours, call it like let's be on and in it to win it from 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 at night. And then let's relax and rebuild and rejuvenate from 6:30 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. You know, but of course there's life, right? You said you were doing a Broadway play and all of these things. And so, you know, that's life. But that's also what makes life enjoyable. So now we need to work with that too.
Yeah, I kind of wish that I had a Dutch test during this time, because I've done many Dutch tests and my nighttime cortisol has never been an issue, but I would have been interested to see it in comparison, like the same time as this, to see.
Sure.
Wasn't really having any sleep issues. So I guess a question for you is, when symptoms or like lived experience maybe doesn't match up with the results, then how do you sort of rectify recommendations in supplements versus maybe then getting into lifestyle and habits, like around sleep hygiene, thought patterning, mindset, maybe over exercising, things like that?
100%. So like in my first book, The Rain Barrel Effect that you mentioned, the first half of the book is how we become unwell. Second half of the book is how we get well. And so I use the de-stress protocol. So every client gets a diet plan, exercise, stress reduction plan, a rest, that's sleep, and then there's emotional balance, scientifically backed supplements, and then there is the success mindset. So without the mindset, it's hard to carry it through, right? So supplements is only one part of this, but the way that people feel better faster is through nutrition and supplementation. If you did nothing else, you will get better faster that way. And if you don't do those two, it's hard for exercise and other things to outpace a bad diet, right? So exercise is, we use all of those things. And yes, so what we look at is if there's not a sleep issue, we don't need to focus on sleep. But if the body is too wound up in terms of nervous system, we do need to calm it down in order for better absorption. So remember, like if a car gets its best gas mileage at like 45 miles an hour, right? Like slow and steady, not slow and steady, but like that, just like perfect pace. When you're doing 90 on the highway, you're burning through gas faster, right? Especially the car. If the car is like a little bit tired, right? All those a little older, boom, you press the gas, it's going to burn through that a lot faster. So we have to understand is that for those that are high performers and higher achievers, you just need to supplement, not just with nutritional supplements, but supplement your lifestyle. So that might mean for you, Lauren, taking a 20 to 30 minute nap post lunch because you just want to calm the central nervous system. When I was working 80-hour weeks when I had my in-person clinics, the second day was literally another day. Like I worked like 2 8-hour days. It was wild, right? So after lunch, I would go for a walk during lunch. I would get lunch. I would come back, 20 minutes, basically eye mask on, binaural beats on a PMF mat, veg out, and I was like a new person. Great. So that is a supplement. Like I'm supplementing my crazy lifestyle there with things that calm my nervous system, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. That probably speaks more to Renee. She's the nap queen. I can't nap. Like my Aura ring every year is like, you took 5 naps the entire year. Like it just doesn't work for me. I can do like the non-sleep deep rest, but taking a walk, just being in nature, just getting off electronics is like a good rest for me. But I think for everyone, like just finding their own way to do that rest and kind of down regulate, right, is probably a good way to reset in the middle of the day.
That's what bioindividuality is really all about. And so, it's a system I developed called personomics. Whatever is best for me is not necessarily what's best for you. And whatever's best for you isn't necessarily what's best for Renee. So, but all of us have a foundation that we need. We all need good, clean, healthy food. We all need to move our bodies. But how much we should move our body depends on the individual. And so my goal is just to share, based on where you're at right now, based on what you're telling me, based on what these labs are, because we're not static human beings, this is your plan for the next 16 weeks. And then we'll reassess in 16 weeks. So I'll move on to your heavy metals if there's no other questions there.
Yeah, go
but
for it.
do feel free to ask any questions you have.
And jump in, Renee, if you have any thoughts.
Okay.
All right, so next we look at toxic heavy metals. So the goal here, this is binary. It is you're either in the green or you have an elevated level of lead, mercury, cadmium, arsenic, and aluminum. And these things are found in our water. They're found in our soil. They're found in some home-based items. And they are very toxic. So when you have heavy metals in your body, they create free radicals and oxidative stress. They age us quickly. They create inflammation, brain-based issues, and much more. Like anything from heart disease to type 2 diabetes to Alzheimer's. And so when we look at these labs, I do want to share with you, there is no upper limit. So it's essentially infinity because we're working with general population. We don't know the upper. We know what it should be, but it could be as high as a human has, right? So if someone's working literally, with, we see auto mechanics, I mean, their levels will be off the chart, right? So when I look at yours, this is as good as it gets, honestly, for heavy metals. You can't do better than this, really. Your aluminum, I know it looks like it's elevated, but it's not, because remember, anything above is going to be right around that middle until we created a checkpoint on infinity. And then we could have it right on the green. So if the top wasn't infinity, you would be right on that green line, because we start to get worried about aluminum when it's above a 1.0 and you're a 0.36. And so it's still, in the grand scheme of things, it is very low. And you have to keep in mind, aluminum is in the air. It's in the soil. It's in the tap water. If you go out and get a iced coffee with friends or an iced tea, it is in the ice cubes, most likely. So, that's the issue with aluminum. It's in antiperspirants. It's in everything. That's the problem with. So all the rest we want as close to zero as possible. But aluminum, we expect it to be a little elevated.
That makes me feel better.
I've heard that. Yeah, I've heard that almost everyone has higher aluminum, and a big part of it is, like you said, in the air. I don't know if it's like chemtrails or like something that's coming out of plane exhaust or something, but we're just exposed to it every day.
Yep, and it gets into our house and it gets in the dust particles. And so then the dust particles are in the air. And again, these are microscopic. So that this is just a great way to test for it instead of having to take your blood all the time, because you can test your blood for aluminum as well. So what I like to share with people, though, is that there's always so much you can do with natural health, right? Like there's so many different things, but it starts with clean air. So air filter in your house. And if you can only afford one, no problem. You probably have your favorites as well. Put it in your bedroom 2 hours before bed. Put it on high, cycle through the air. It'll cycle through the air like 3 or 4 times before bed. Then just set it to auto and you'll be good overnight. Then bring it out to your living room where you're probably going to be the majority of the day. And you can just do it that way. And then every year you might get one more, and so then you have one in the bedroom, one in the living room, and so that's how we have accumulated our air filters over the years. So clean air, then it's clean water. You breathe air all day long, then you want clean water, and you want clean water for everything, for your smoothies, for your coffees, for your teas, for your ice cubes, whatever you're using it for. And so you get a good reverse osmosis filter. I used to recommend the Berkey. It's not that I think the Berkey is bad, but there's so much stuff in the water. And I just want to make sure that everybody gets clean water with minerals added back in. You can add hydrogen to it. You can do all sorts of great things for your water, but you need clean water. And then after that is clean food. Follow the Clean 15 and Dirty Dozen if you can't afford all organic, and it's a great place to start.
Can I ask you what water filter you use personally?
I use the AquaTrue water filter under the sink.
Oh, we love AquaTrue. That's great to hear. Okay,
They've been doing it forever. I love companies like Therasage is another one. They've been doing it for 30 plus years. Like this is like in their DNA. And I love that. Like I started in the mid 90s. I started as a patient in the mid 90s. These companies started in the mid 90s. So it's great that they were around before the internet and they're still here. So it's just great.
That's a good sign.
Robbie's been kicking it for a while.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And we both have Air Doctors too.
And I use Air Doctor as well. Yeah, there's other
cool.
brands that are great. But Air Doctor's quiet, it's reliable, it's a fair price. So I think it's great.
Yeah, just every time they have a sale, just accumulate another one.
Yep. Get filters, vacuum your filters once a month. It'll make them last longer. And it's a good way to do it.
Yeah. I just want to ask your opinion real quick on the aluminum. I feel better about it knowing what you said, but I do drink out of cans and particularly in this last year, I got really hooked on this paraxanthine drink in a can. And like, you know, my water is clean, my air is clean. You know, I was in New York City, so of course there's still exposure everywhere. But what do you think about drinking out of cans? How much would that increase my exposure?
So it definitely increases your exposure, not to the same level as you would think, but not for a good reason. And that's typically because they're covered in microplastic, the inside.
Yeah.
So that they don't, because if it was straight aluminum or tin, it would rust. And so they have to have a protective barrier. But over time, it just starts to add up. A place we see aluminum, most people, is aluminum pans and aluminum spatulas, or just stainless steel spatula and aluminum pan. You scrape the pan when you're cooking eggs or whatever it is, just microparticles over time start to, so that's the biggest thing is like, and people are like, well, I can't replace all my pans. Totally get it. Take the one that you cook with 80% of the time, replace that first. And so like that's the most economical way. And then use a silicone spatula or a bamboo spatula, something like that. And you'll be less likely with metal on metal to scrape any of that off.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
All right, let's move over to Renee's. But overall, it was a great, I mean, this is a great lab test. A couple things to work on in terms of sympathetic nervous system stress, and then just a couple other things like maybe using a product like balanced zinc just to get the copper levels up a little bit. So it has zinc and copper. If you're taking a straight zinc, you would just use one that has both. That's it. Like, you know, pretty straightforward. And then, of course, we're not going into diet and all of that because I would have to ask you, what are you eating right now? And we have to go through all your macros, and so we're not doing all that right now.
Yeah, I'm going to just keep you here all day.
Well, I mean, it's great to do. Don't get me wrong. But, you know, it's a good 3-hour consult. All right.
Yeah.
So we've got Renee up next. And so now that everybody knows kind of how the lab works, I'll just share with you. So essentially, really optimal calcium to magnesium. It's right there in the middle. And magnesium, if I were to multiply 7 times 7, I get 49, very close to that 55, right? So it's very close. And so we're essentially at where we need to be in terms of magnesium, or we just add a little bit more, or we add a little bit more on the days you're feeling a little bit more stressed, if that makes sense. So it might not even be an everyday thing. Because everybody goes through periods of stress, like, okay, this is a stressful week because my kids have to be up early, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. Like there's always, you know, something going on, and then it kind of tapers back down. So I also use nutritional supplements. We've got our baseline, but then we add a little bit more, again, supplementing life when we need it. So that's one way to look at it. All right. But the difference is that it doesn't look like the same level of fight or flight sympathetic nervous system stress that Lauren was experiencing, at least during those 2 months. But yours does show a little lower response to stress. So it doesn't look like stress is as high, but it also looks like the energy reserves, right? The get up and go energy reserves is not as high as it maybe was. This is, I mean, I can't, I'd have to see your previous HTMAs from years ago, but let's just say like 3 to 5 years ago.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And you can disagree.
Yeah.
I can only read, you know, what I see for this lab,
yeah.
But I always like to hear from people how they feel.
Yeah, I mean, a little backstory. I pretty much lived in that like fight or flight state 24/7. Like I was a type A OCD go-getter, and then I pretty much crashed and burned.
How long ago was that?
The first time that happened was 2008, and my traditional doctor said, your blood work is perfect. You have chronic fatigue syndrome. We don't know why. I fortunately found a chiropractor through our dad, Dr. Tom Groover in Colorado. He ran a salivary cortisol panel on me. This was in 2008, where I was like, I don't even know what this is, but sure, I'll do it. My cortisol was totally flatlined. And I've kind of had that happen like 3 times now. Like I build it back up and then I burn out and crash. I build it back up, I burn out and crash. So it's a little bit of a recurring theme. So that does make sense. Like I have built a very low stress lifestyle. But I don't know that that's always the best solution, right? I want to be more resilient to stress. I want to have that fire to fight it. But if I have a really stressful day, I'm out. Like I'll sleep like 10 or 11 hours that night because my body's like, whew, we got through it, but barely.
That's exactly what it shows. It shows a lower reserve. When you have a potassium of a 2, it's just showing a lower adrenal, or people hate to say like adrenal fatigue, all that, so we'll use more technical terms. So HPA axis response. So the hypothalamus pituitary response, which uses ACTH and other hormones to stimulate the adrenals, is not there because of previous burnout, whatever it might be, stress-based architecture. What I will say is that the idea that you're mentioning is exactly what you need to do and want to do. So you create calluses, like from weightlifting. You build up with hermetic stressors slowly. So that means every quarter you have a plan. So the plan would be, right now I do 2 days a week of strength training. Let's just say that. Great. So you'll add a third day maybe as your next quarterly plan. So Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you'll keep the same level of volume on those 2 days, but you'll now add a third day. There'll be a day off in between, so we'll call it Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And then if that's going well, maybe 6 weeks after that, you'll add, if you do on average 6,000 steps a day, you'll add 10 more minutes of walking, which will get you 1,000 more steps. So you very gently, while still getting the same sleep and never increasing energy out when you're not bringing energy in. So if your sleep is down a week, that's not the week to give more energy out, if that makes sense. So
Definitely.
that's how we do basically. Like, and again, so what's a stressor? Well, here are some healthy things that are stressors. Working out, sauna, intermittent fasting, cleanses, like those are all stressful in the body. So we have to be careful that we're not overdoing it with you right now, while I would take 12 to 16 weeks to continue to build up your strength reserves. Good nutrition. You can see if we move into your minerals right now, there's only one that's in the optimal zone, and that's copper, right? And so when we look at that, we're seeing zinc out of range. I'll explain that in a moment. Zinc is high, but everything else is low. Manganese, low. Weaker stress response. Chromium, very low. Chromium's low in the yellow for a lot of people because, truthfully, it's not in the soil like it was years ago. So unless you're eating nuts and seeds and those types of things, probably not getting chromium. If you're not using a daily activated multivitamin, or we use daily nutritional support, probably not getting chromium. Same with selenium. Unless you're eating like Brazil nuts or other things like that, or using a supplement, you're probably not getting enough selenium. And your phosphorus is low as well. And so unlike Lauren's, which I think Lauren's, I was nitpicking, yours is low. So that means, one, you're not eating enough protein, or two, you're burning through your reserves just much faster than you're taking them in. And so for me, I would say across the board, I need to get all of your minerals and all of your nutrients higher. So it doesn't necessarily mean more calories or macros, it means more micros, more vitamins and minerals. It could be greens, it could be low calorie things, but I need to get those minerals up. Or I need to improve digestion, because maybe your digestion's weak from years of burnout, right? So, okay, we'll use some digestive enzymes to start, or a little apple cider vinegar, 1 tablespoon in a 6-ounce glass of water at a meal, or we might use ginger tea. We'll do something to improve overall digestion. Does that make sense, Renee?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what it shows, is that there's the electrolytes, but then there's also, this is most likely, as you said, years of up and down. And so we need I call it a 16-week period of restoration. So what I like to say to a client like yourself is, everything we're thinking about, does this bring energy in or energy out? And if it's energy out, we have to say, okay, where then am I bringing more energy in? And if it's more energy out, like on a scale, then energy in, it's tipped too far to one side. And what's the best energy in? Breath work, meditation, sleep, sit. Like that's, anything that regulates the nervous system and gets you good, deep sleep. So like knockout sleep is what we need.
Yeah, yeah. And I have built a life around that. Like I do about 30 minutes a day of usually like a brain tap on my PEMF or some HRV biofeedback breath work. Like I love all that. I always feel better. And with exercise, I definitely feel better with just weightlifting. Cardio tends to kind of burn me out. So I just focus on lifting weights and getting my steps in. But if I'm not well rested, I just won't work out. And so typically when I travel, I do not work out when I travel, because when I'm traveling, I'm typically getting less sleep. I'm more stressed from being on a plane and EMFs and not eating my normal diet. I just don't work out. And some people think that's crazy. Like, you're a biohacker, you don't work out on vacation. I'm like,
no, that's true.
It just depends if I need it. Yeah.
No, you're doing true biohacking. True biohacking is about balance.
Yes.
It's not taking to excess. Like that is what that's the next wave that people are really going to begin to understand, that it's not how much you do, it's what you need to balance your body. So I'm not an endomorphic body type. I'm not a kapha, as they call it, from Ayurvedic medicine. I respond just fine to carbohydrates and not over excess exercise. I don't gain weight very easily, which means for me, I don't need to overdo the exercise or output because I'm more higher nervous system output, if that makes sense. So meaning like we're always doing the thing. So if you look at exercise, going lower rep, sub 5 reps would not be a great thing for you, especially to failure, because that's more neurological. Staying above the 10 to 12, 15 reps is not necessarily weighing on the nervous system as much as keeping it more on the muscle, and doing body weight is even better because now there's not that strain on the nervous system in the same way. So it doesn't mean you only have to do body weight. It just means that when you're really feeling it, you can dial back the stress on the nervous system.
Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense.
All right. Let's check out those heavy metals. This will be my first time looking at your heavy metals, so we'll see.
Surprise!
All right, good. Surprise. We've got a little bit of mercury. Again, aluminum's only a 0.41, so we're not going to get overboard on aluminum. And actually, if we look at mercury, it's 0.019. That's the cutoff. You're 0.022. So in the grand scheme of things, this is just over the line. This would be on the green, honestly. But this is a good teaching point, at least for all the listeners out there. And that where does mercury typically come from? Sure, could be in the water, usually from larger fish, from sushi. So typically it's from tuna or swordfish, larger sea bass. All of those could definitely be part of it. Some of it's people don't like to talk about this, but still 50% of all vaccines still have mercury as one of the adjuvants to it. So it doesn't mean that I'm saying not to get them. What I'm saying is just be aware, and you can do a heavy metal detox, and you can do an infrared sauna, and you can get the metals out that way as well. Where do you think you may have gotten some of the mercury?
Yeah, well, I will say in 2013, my mercury was like off the charts, and then I did a 6-month mercury detox, so it's good to see that it's down. But we grew up in the 90s eating canned tuna fish like it was going out of style. So that was the thing. I don't really eat seafood now. I barely touch it. Did have all the childhood vaccines in the 80s. And then in 2007, I got the flu vaccine. 3 months later, I got mono, and my health was never the same after that. So I think like there was kind of a lineup there. And then also our parents, so our dad's a biological dentist and our mom is a holistic dental hygienist. I fortunately never had any silver amalgam fillings, but in the early 80s, our dad was rolling mercury around in his fingers and placing fillings in patients' mouths. So I wonder, could I have gotten some was I born with some exposure to mercury?
Well, if your mom was exposed to it, which most likely she was, we know heavy metals pass through the placenta, so that's certainly possible. What I would say is that some of these are transient. A big part of it, as you just said, is which I didn't mention, and I'm glad you brought it up, is the mercury amalgams or silver amalgams inside the mouth. Oftentimes, these are best kept unless they're upturned, because you need to find a really good dentist to take them out. Now, should you have them taken out? Yes, like they're going to eventually begin to wear away. And so you just have to find a really good qualified dentist. You might have your recommendations. I would just say, go check out IAOMT.org and you'll find a biological dentist and they'll extract them properly. Any dentist will, of course, but they'll literally just cut them in half.
They'll just drill them right out. Yeah. No, you should see our dad's. Yeah, our dad's setup, it's like full hazmat suit for him, the assistant, the patient, all of the proper, air filtration, oxygen. He goes like above and beyond.
Yes. Where's his practice?
Maryland.
Maryland. Well, what's the name of the practice?
The Julian Center for Comprehensive Dentistry.
Okay. If I have anybody in Maryland, then I'll be able to send them there. Yeah, I have a biological dentist up in Boston that we always recommend to people. And like you said, like they go above and beyond with the ozone, the ventilation, the rubber dams, like all of it, right? And so then they use then our functional medicine detox afterwards, our heavy metal detox. They tell clients to try to do an infrared sauna, as much as they can, especially the 2 weeks following, because no matter what, there's still some exposure. So what I would say for you is this might just be residual and you're almost down. Like you just have just a little bit more to go. So you could do a heavy metal detox, which I recommend everybody do anyways, once a year, just to continue to pull it out. People should be aware if they've lost weight recently, a lot of metals are accumulated in your adipose tissue. And so don't be surprised if they start popping up on a minerals and metals test if you haven't been exposed in years, because once the contents of the fat begins to come into the bloodstream, your body will hopefully excrete it. And part of it will be through the skin with sweating, part of it will be into the hair, and part of it will be through the bile into the liver out of the body as well.
Okay. One other question about with the toxic metals. So can you explain how what we're looking at in the hair, like could like the mercury or aluminum be stored elsewhere in the body, in the brain or different tissues, and we don't know if it's there?
If it's showing up on this lab test, it most likely is stored elsewhere, but now is being released. Sometimes we don't see these metals released until someone starts to get healthy, because their body does store it away, and we know that until the body's able to then finally lower inflammation levels, improve kidney and liver detoxification, drainage pathways through the lymphatic system, so rebounding, all of these things. I know that they're popular now, but honestly, like, they always have worked and they're great to do. And so I love when people promote them now, and they joke around with their red light mask on, and they're doing the trampoline, they're doing everything. It's like, yeah, like all those things do work, honestly. You don't need to do them all. Do the thing that is most needed for you. And neither one of you do I see like have massive lymphatic congestion or anything like that. So like rebounding, although fun and great and easy on the nervous system, wouldn't be my first recommendation for you, right? Like that wouldn't be it. And then with you, Renee, typically I would say, we're going to do infrared sauna 3-4 days a week, but with your depleted minerals, I don't know if it's the best idea quite yet. If we do it, it won't be to exhaustion. It might be 10 to 15 minutes in an infrared sauna. And that's nice as well. But we would also send you in with an electrolyte formula. So you'd either choose your favorite electrolyte, or you'd make your own just with some sea salt and a squeeze of lemon or lime to get your sodium potassium.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And what about the like adrenal cocktail? I think I saw that you recommended that somewhere.
We use a product called Adrenal Energy Support by Equilife. Again, people can choose their favorite brands. I just say look for a third-party tested brand, because it will end up with mercury if not, and lead.
Yeah.
Truthfully, like that's, if you use herbs, you have to be careful. You just need to make sure that it's third-party tested, that there's a certificate of analysis. And great companies are, of course, going to do that. So the ingredients inside the Adrenal Energy Support are really, of course, what matter. And so we recommend things like licorice root, which extends the half-life of your cortisol production. We recommend specific medicinal-based mushrooms, such as chaga and cordyceps, B vitamins. So for you, if I made my recommendation, it would probably be either 2 daily nutritional support a day, or the daily nutritional support plus the activated B complex. And you would take 1 activated B at lunch and 1 at dinner, because B vitamins are the anti-stress vitamin. And so that's going to be, if you don't get your B vitamins, hard to be able to fend off stress. So it's like my number 1 recommendation for you. And then I think your zinc was high. Okay. Your zinc was high because, again, I don't know your thyroid levels as well, but your copper is too low. So I'm not sure if you supplemented with zinc or if your copper is just really that low. So what happens is every mineral in the body has a partner. And if you give more zinc, it pushes down copper if you're not taking in any copper. And if you give more copper, it'll push down zinc. So for us, we want to take in a little bit of copper right now, not excess, but that's something that we would look at. Remember, copper powers the mitochondria. And so really important for ATP production and energy.
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit of copper without zinc.
Well, we almost always give the zinc in ratio, a 15-to-1 ratio, but you could certainly take 1 milligram of copper in addition to whatever you're doing. Yes, that would be fine. Again, it's a small amount. So with zinc, we want most people to get 30 milligrams a day total. With copper, we're typically not going over 2 milligrams. So it's a smaller amount.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah, the whole copper conversation, I've kind of gone down a rabbit hole recently. I actually had a copper deficiency on the SpectraCell micronutrient labs like 15 years ago. And back then, like I remember asking around and everyone was like, copper deficiency? No one's deficient in copper. I was like, the blood work shows that. And I'm familiar with Morley Robbins' work, which is, I know, somewhat controversial, but the whole role of copper, it's very interesting.
Yeah, and truthfully, we see copper toxicity as well. That's why we never recommend supplementing with copper unless we've run a lab test. Like that's the truth, because typically you don't want to do that. You'll do a balance. We call it balancing. It's 15 milligrams of zinc and 1 milligram of copper. That stays in balance. So that's why you just want to be careful of straight copper. And but again, a lab test like this shows you. And so that's what allows you then to make the recommendation. How long do you take it? 3 to 6 months. And then after that, if you were taking just straight copper at 1 milligram, you would typically come off. But you can also, run the lab again to make sure you're in check.
Great.
Got it.
Yeah, thank
Okay.
you for sharing about
Thank
the
you.
relationships. I think people need to hear that more and more because people tend to isolate without understanding that they're all trying to be in a synergistic little unit. And we don't want to tip the scale. We're almost at the end of our time. I just want to push out 2 quick questions. Is it useful to look at oxidation rate? Did you want to mention anything about that? And then also wanted to ask your opinion on the importance of retesting.
Yes. So oxidation rate is essentially, we can look at it in 3 different ways. There's a fast oxidizer, typically and usually only seen in childhood, but it can be as an adult as well, with high sympathetic nervous system drive. Then in adulthood, we typically see a slow oxidizer, which means essentially that the systems are processing slower because there have been years of stress on the body. What we aim for is a mixed oxidizer, which shows good energy reserves and good balance in terms of stress. So we don't get too deep into clients because we explain that through the electrolyte stress levels, which is where the oxidation rate is taken from. In terms of retesting, so I would recommend the both of you, you're going to do a 12 to 16 week protocol, and then we want to wait for the hair to grow out after that. So that means we do, call it 4-month protocol, wait 3 more months. So usually we're really not testing for 6 to 7 months after this first lab. And that allows you then to put in the work, because out of any lab, this one is going to show the slowest progress because it's showing it in arrears. So that's why what they call it the omega-6, omega-3 inflammation test, we could do that every 4 weeks if we wanted to. Stress minimum metabolism test every 4 weeks if we wanted to. But this one, it takes a little bit more time. So that's why I like to just let people know ahead of time. No need to run this except for once to twice a year. The others could be run more often if you wanted to. Food sensitivity would still also be 6 months. So yeah, every lab has its shelf life of when you want to run it and to get the most out of it, but also the most value, because you don't want to go overboard, I would say, in any one lab, amazing lab, for even more detailed results than this. We would say, okay, if we think there's a stress and maybe potential thyroid, like functional thyroid, next test we're going to run is that stress minimum metabolism test to actually see what that free T3 is, not just TSH on blood work.
Okay. Is that test a blood test?
That is a saliva and blood spot. So you prick your finger.
Saliva and blood spot,
All the
okay.
labs that we run at Equalife are all at-home integrative health tests or functional medicine tests. So none of them require a blood draw. Again, I'm a huge advocate
Awesome.
of getting your blood drawn and doing your blood work. There are lots of great companies for that. But for the at-home lab testing, what we're looking at is below the surface now of your blood work as to why something might be off with the blood work.
Okay. Yeah, makes
Excellent.
sense.
Great for those people that do not want to get their blood drawn.
Like my husband.
Yeah, funny story on that. Literally every Friday at my clinic in Boston, we had blood draw Fridays, and it was from 8 to 12. And I had a mobile phlebotomist come in, and we would book it out because all we needed was 15 minutes for each person. And so we would just have this, big turnover, like people would just be coming in. Funny though, out of all the people that signed up, only about 50% of the people would show up, because nobody likes putting a needle in their arm, especially on a Friday. And so that's these at-home lab tests really became indispensable. Like we needed them just because people were just not willing to get their blood drawn as easily. So
I would have signed up in 2 slots. I would have been like, get this arm, then get this arm. I'll take their spot.
all the data.
Yeah.
All the data.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I think I learned a lot. Hopefully this was really interesting for our audience. And I think I just wanted to share your book here, Personomics, The End of All Disease. So if anyone wants to take a deeper dive, especially into all the tests, like you do a really good job breaking those down. And then I think also like the stories in there, like especially if you have any thyroid issues, I think it's really interesting to hear like how thyroid issues can express differently in people. So definitely check out the book. But Dr. Cabral, can you share where else people can learn more? Are you taking new patients right now?
Yeah, so my team for your community is doing half off this lab, the minerals and metals test. And people can run the Big Five. They can do whatever feels like the right fit for them. But this is just an easy step. If you've never done a functional medicine lab test, it's a nice way to do it. That's at stephencabral.com/biohacker. And that comes with a coaching call. So basically, just a few minutes of asking you how you're feeling, how you're doing, all of those things. It's reading over your results and it's giving you a recommendation on that. So we do take on clients full-time as well, which a full consultation, recommendation for what labs are best for you. Then the labs come in, we go through a full report. That's a little bit more in depth, and people are welcome to do that too. And everything's just over at Equalife, and I'm sure in the show notes maybe you can link that up. But my goal is, I teach. So every day I do my Cabral Concept podcast, and then I've got the 2 books, and the books are meant to be hopefully tools. Like literally, I like them to be action books, and so they have self-questionnaires in there, and it kind of walks you through this process. Because the best thing is education, and honestly, I have an 11 and 13-year-old, and the best thing that I've ever done is figure out my own health so that I can help them as well. That's the truth.
Yeah, so powerful.
That's great.
Your podcast is excellent. Definitely, please go check it out. For those of you that are listening, so much information can be gleaned by tuning in. How often do you release?
Every day. It's about 12 minutes show.
Every single day. How do you
12
do
to
that?
15 minutes. So it's a quick
Amazing.
little bites on one specific topic. Here's the problem. Here's what we've seen in our practice over the last 26 years. And then here's typically the resolution or the action steps to take.
Amazing. Very generous of you with your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Dr. Stephen, just one final question before we let you go. Can you give our audience one piece of advice, something they can start doing, implementing today to optimize their health?
One of the easiest things that we've seen in our practice, and some people it doesn't fit for, is just to make sure that they get their breakfast right and make it easily digestible. So some people do need a higher protein, and usually they'll go with meat, or they'll go with eggs, and they'll go with something a little bit more heavier or satiating. We've seen in our practice a simple smoothie. Maybe you need a little bit of food on the side with it, but it just allows us to get hydration in. Not enough people are getting water to start their day. They're starting with coffee, which is like just a net neutral for most people if you've been doing coffee every day. So if you don't want to do a smoothie, usually you can put a lot of your favorite supplements in there. You can put your creatine, you can put your daily nutrition support. You can open up capsules if you're not a big capsule person. You can put them in that. But if you're not going to do that, at least get a nice little homemade electrolyte drink. I call it natural Gatorade. Put in some greens if you want, but start your day with hydration, at least 20 ounces of fluid water. And it's just so much better. Like your body will then maybe not even need as much caffeine. So if you can do that, a great way to start the day. And that's what I'd recommend.
Love that. Perfect.
Yes, definitely. I don't know how people don't immediately wake up and drink water. It just is like, oh, it feels so good in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. All right. Well, thank you so much. Everyone make sure you scroll down in the show notes. We have lots of great resources for you. And thank you for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate you.
And thanks to everyone for tuning in. We'll see you next time.